I'm very happy to have you here today. Can Dündar. Can Dündar is editor-in-chief of Özgürüz and one of the best science knowledge guy on what is going on in Turkey. And Can, we are listening over the last weeks a lot of horrible news from Turkey. And just a couple of days ago, there was already another earthquake. Yeah. Can you please tell us what happened after the first disaster, a second disaster?
Yeah, the second was one was also very dangerous. But thanks God, this time there were rescue teams there and people were not at the houses. That's why, I mean, the deaths were not so high in the second one, but it was really struck the city and the buildings has gone. Most of the buildings are gone after this one.
I mean, what is so difficult for us or for me, for people here in Germany, is to understand the scale of what is happening. I just saw some pictures from the air, and it's like whole cities are gone.
Yeah, I will try to explain. I mean, let's imagine an area as big as Austria with 10 cities and almost 16 million people. So they all affected in one night, in a couple of minutes, destroyed. So it was almost impossible to reach most of the cities, whole darkness, -9 degrees Celsius, and people were desperately in need of rescue teams. But this is the biggest in our history, okay? And it was not an earthquake, it was an apocalypse. It was really huge. That's why, I mean, many people were under the ruins. So imagine, I mean, our reporter was there. Imagine at night, very cold, full darkness, and you are just walking between the ruins and you've been hearing lots of noises. We are here, save us. But hundreds of them, thousands of them, and nobody's there. Imagine you have to do something, but how come? So people were there trying to get their loved ones out. You're a father and your family is there, but you have nothing to save them. And you are waiting for the state to do something. They waited for the first day, the second day, the third day. The state were not there. So people start getting angry, but I mean, no state there. All of a sudden they realize that they don't have a state to save them.
What I find very interesting, I mean, you just said, no, in the second earthquake, there were rescue teams, but the rest of the houses that was still stable collapsed.
Yeah.
And Erdoğan was also on the scene. Did he do something on the scene?
Yeah, he insulted people. He really, with the very bad words, he criticized the people who criticizes him. Because people were really angry. They were asking for help, for tents, for food, but most important, to save their loved ones. I mean, there are cases people can be saved, I mean, in the 24th day, 25th day, and today, 14th day already, and they start, getting the stuff out, with many people maybe still alive there. So it's really unbelievable what they are doing, because they are trying to cover it up. He banned the Twitter first day, and because Twitter was the only mean people can reach to each other, even from under the ruins, people were tweeting saying that we are here, save us. And he banned this Twitter just to stop the criticism.
Just to understand. So people were asking for help from under the rubble via Twitter, and he said, stop shouting and...
Not stop shouting, but I mean, the Twitter was kind of full of criticism against him, and he decided to ban it. Yeah. But the criticism was then, people were really very angry, then he had to withdraw.
And today you said people were asking for tents. I mean, when I hear to this 60 million people in the area, and no housing conditions anymore, or almost all is damaged or gone, where do people sleep?
Yeah, normally in the tents, but there were no tents. So some of them were in the cars, and some of them moved already. So many people displaced from the area and went to.
But do they still stay in the area?
Some of them already moved to some touristic hotels in Antalya or somewhere, but some of them still waiting in front of the buildings and hoping that they can get their loved ones out still. But most of them in the cars or on the streets, really desperately waiting.
Where do they get food from?
Yeah, now, I mean, in fact, the civil society was so strong. I mean, they were the first ones who reached the area, and they start feeding people and providing camps, etc., tents, camps. But then another unbelievable thing happened. Erdoğan stopped them. He said only official institutions can do this, and you cannot reach people.
So anybody who wants to help can't reach the region?
Yeah, they tried, but then, I mean, the official help organizations stopped them, and they said, you have to deliver the goods to us, and then we'll distribute. And imagine, people are really getting crazy because they have the tents, they have the food, but the state not allowed them to distribute it because they said, we have to do this.
I mean, it's an area sometimes quite remote. What is with water? Do they have water?
No, I mean, thanks God it was raining and people were, collecting some water from the rain. But I mean, all the streets are destroyed. So no electricity, no water, no food, etc. So really, I mean, it was a huge, huge thing. And then what we realized, the damage of one man, one party system there, because all the bureaucracy waited for the decision of one guy who lives in his palace. And he waited for 2 days and people gone. I mean, if it was a parliamentary system, then, I mean, everybody may know what to do. But this time, he's the guy and he has to decide. But he didn't know what to do. Then he's gone.
It's just horrible. I mean, what we really need to understand, I guess, is the scale. I mean, we were talking in the very beginning of a few thousand, like 2,000, 3,000 people. And first time I met you in the office, you said it's the biggest disaster in the history of Turkey, our times.
Yeah.
And what are the figures? Are we talking about?
I mean, at the moment, the official number is 41,000 people dead. And most probably it will be tripled, the number. It's more than 100,000. But this is another thing. I mean, if you don't have a trustable official institution or free media, you cannot be sure about the deaths. Some villages are still has been reached, So even after two weeks, we don't know the scale of it. We don't know how many people are under the ruins. And maybe we would understand in a couple of weeks or months, but most people estimating more than 100,000, which is one of the biggest. So it was the hit was something like 7.9, which is really big, but this big cannot have the same damage in Japan, for example. So that's the reason why this is the construction business now. So the constructors.
Let's talk about the real problems. But I first want to step back for one more question on the situation. One would expect that the army would step in. I mean, the army has got the means, they've got food, they've got the organization exactly in a situation like that to deliver first aid. What happened to them?
You are so right. The last biggest earthquake was in 1999. I was there as a journalist, so it was very close to Istanbul. And the first thing the government was calling the army for help because army is the most organized group in Turkey. So they came and, start saving people's life. But today, army was not there because Erdoğan didn't order them to intervene because he was scared. He was scared that the army will be popular again and maybe a military coup would happen if the army is, is the people's savior. So he kept them waited. in the big cities. And in the third day, he let them go. And it was so late. And people were really furious that they were calling, the army is there with a huge population and people suffering there. And they were waiting one man to order the army, save the people. He didn't.
And I would expect that some army official or colonel or general would say, okay, you can tell me later, please send me a fax.
Exactly.
But this didn't happen.
Yeah, no, this didn't happen. And this is the horrible thing. I mean, in a kind of this totalitarian systems, no one can challenge the guy who's running the country. So, I mean, so the commander of the army, who is the minister of defense now, very close to Erdogan, and he's like, he suppressed the last military coup attempt. So, I mean, he cannot do anything without the permission of Erdogan. So they just freezed, and unfortunately they couldn't move.
So people died because one man was was too fearful to do something, or what was the reason why Erdogan didn't do anything?
Yeah, he's scared that the army will be so popular again, because I mean we have a history of military governments, and he's scared of a military intervention. And most of the people, of course, died in the first night under the ruins, but most of them later on died in freezing under the rain, waiting for people to save them. And unfortunately, nobody could do that.
Oh.
And really, I mean, you must see the videos of mothers and fathers. They are hearing their loved ones' voices, and they cannot, of course, dig the soil, and they need machines, and there were no machines around.
You just said that something like this would not happen in Japan, for example.
Or Germany.
In Germany, we don't have such earthquakes usually.
Yeah.
But why couldn't it happen? Why could it happen in Turkey? What was the problem?
First, everybody knows, and the experts has been telling that this is a war zone. It's a earthquake zone, you know. So you don't have to build those cities on this soil, but they did. And then they said, be careful about the buildings. But I mean, you got the permission for 2 floors, and you have 10 floors buildings, because it's so easy. Just bribery, you know, just pay the rent and then it's okay. And after you have 10 floors, the government says, oh, okay, we have an amnesty this year, and then let's close this file. And no control at all. So this is another.
Who was
disaster.
responsible for the control?
Yeah, and I cannot say that only Erdogan. It's been going on for decades, unfortunately, and all the governments trying to save their ass, you know, because I mean, if you allow people to do this, you can get more votes, of course, and then I mean, so they let people do whatever they want, and there was no control at all.
But what is with building control? I mean, in Germany we know Bauamt, the building control.
You remember?
And this is horrible. Yeah. You know, when you build something, you get a lot of trouble, and people ask you to bring papers on and on.
You remember Erdogan said to Chancellor Merkel, "You are jealous about Turkey because we finished the airport, Istanbul airport, very quickly, while the Germans still waiting for the Berlin airport." So I wrote something at that time. Do you know how many people died during the construction of Istanbul airport? Human life is not important in Turkey. So no control. I guess something like 60 people died during the building of the airport. So, I mean, if you don't pay attention to people's life, it's easy, of course, to construct something, but no control at all. But then in the first earthquake, unfortunately, now Istanbul is the biggest danger, under the danger of earthquake.
One thing I guess a lot of people don't understand is when you said amnesty, there's an amnesty for construction. What does it mean? I mean,
yeah, okay. I mean, I have a building with 2 floors, and I would like to, cover the balcony, so to have another room for myself. So it's not allowed, but I do it in practice. and the controls came, and they said you cannot do this. If you wait for another election, before the election, the government says, okay, I know it's illegal, but for this time, I would let you do it. Or you have 2-floor apartment and you want another 2 floors. You did it, and the government says, okay, for this, I would let you do. This is the amnesty thing.
And what about buildings, new buildings? I heard that it's possible, or people did it, they just constructed houses somewhere, and in a place they weren't supposed to build a house, but still did it. Is it also kind of thing to this illegal amnesty?
Yeah, it is. This is the reason. I mean, why the death numbers are so big. Otherwise, imagine a city fully destroyed. I mean, no buildings can survive. So there must be something wrong with the construction business, right? So they are the constructors. Do you know you don't need a license to be a constructor in Turkey?
Oh.
You can be constructor if you're a sailor or journalist, or
I would be a very bad constructor.
They are bad constructors. They are really horrible, and they use horrible material and to make it cheaper and to gain a lot of money. They did. And now Erdogan is, accusing them, but he's the one who let them do it, So there must be a political responsibility.
Yeah, let's talk about the political consequences of this. You just said Erdogan was shouting at somebody who was asking for tents.
Yeah.
And insulting this person. I would assume that this would have consequences politically. Are there any consequences right now for Erdogan?
We don't know it yet. It's we don't know the political repercussions yet. But what we know is this 10 cities who were affected by the earthquake mostly were Erdogan supporters. 8 of them voted for Erdogan in the last election. So he hit his supporters. That's important. They were trusting Erdogan, but Erdogan was not there. So,
but do these people remember this at the election? There is supposed to be an election in a couple of weeks. What is going to happen to these elections?
Yeah, this is the biggest question at the moment, because Erdogan said he needs another year to, build it up, the whole cities. But the elections were expected to be held on mid-May, at least mid-June. So he doesn't have a year. And constitutionally, he doesn't have this right to postpone the elections. Only in the case of war, he can do it according to the constitution. So how can he postpone the elections? But what he's saying is, at least his staff saying, that how can we organize an election under these circumstances? 10 cities are gone and people moved. They don't have a record. We don't know how many people died. So in 3 months, we'll be having an election. So in a sense, in one way, it's true. It's almost impossible to organize a proper election. But on the other hand, how can you postpone an election? So this is the biggest challenge at the moment. But I guess, as you know, the economy was already in horrible conditions. And the economists calculating the damage as something like $8 billion after this earthquake. And plus this economic crisis, $8 billion. So it will be really very tough for Erdogan to save this.
On the other hand, Erdogan was always very successful in using crises, times of crisis, for his political gains. What do you expect of this? Will he be able to turn this around and say, okay, maybe in these 10 cities I let people down, but the rest of Turkey will see I'm the savior of all of Turkey?
Yeah, you're so right. Imagine the refugee crisis. He turned it as a victory for himself. Ukraine crisis also helped him to stay in power, and now the earthquake. And I have question marks about this, of course. If he can use this for his advance. It depends. I mean, the last horrible mining disaster was a couple of years ago in Turkey, and 300 people died there, and it was again the fault of the government. But in the elections after this disaster, they voted for Erdoğan again. So it's not a Stockholm syndrome. it's also, they want to see the alternative. If the alternative would be promising to build up the country, rebuild the country again. So I guess it's mostly depending on this. If they cannot trust the alternative parties, opposition parties, then they would think that, okay, at least we have someone who is, tough guy, who is promising at least something for us, and they can again vote for them. So it is now for the opposition to show up and trust to get the people's trust that they can rebuild the country.
But I mean, for me, when I listen to you, when I see the pictures, it's unimaginable big scale disaster. And would it be possible for people to forget about these pictures?
Imagine
they lived through it. It's
yeah, but he promised something like a very limited money to people, and they are desperately in need of it. And he would promise a kind of one-room buildings for them. And for the opposition, they cannot promise anything at the moment. And some of the people may think that, at least I would get this small amount of money and maybe one-room building in 1 year or two. This is just a promise, but he will sell this promise. Of course, they lost their loved ones, but on the other hand, this is the people's, needs to survive, to stay alive, and he would use it, I'm sure.
And what about God? A disaster, I assume people would say, it's not Erdogan's fault, but God did it.
In fact, they didn't think about this. Erdogan said them that this is the fate of the God. This is the fate. So we cannot do anything. But the same God didn't do the same in Japan. So we have a different kind of Japan than God than the Japanese. And the same God protecting Erdogan's palace. Nothing happens there, while poor people dying there. So there must be a reason for this. And I hope people will think about it. So I guess some of the people believe Erdogan that this is the God's decision. Well, it's not more than 5%. Yeah. But most of them know why they died in these poor conditions.
Let's talk about help. So what we can do. What do you think about donations, let's say, to the Red Moon or Red Cross? Is it possible to help through them?
This is another difficult situation because the Red Moon, Kızılay in Turkey's biggest donation organization, help organization, is destroyed by Erdogan. And now Erdogan's family members ruling the whole stuff. And they turn it as a holding now, and they are transferring money to some Islamic foundations via this organization. So nobody trusts them anymore. Nobody wants to give money to them. All the society, all the state mechanisms poisoned by Erdogan, so including this one. And of course, there are some civil society institutions, people want to donate, and Erdogan tried to ban them.
How you can ban somebody to help?
He said you cannot donate them, or if you can donate them, the donations should go via our institutions. It should be all official. So it's very difficult for a German journalist to understand, but if you are, living in an autocratic country, they are dominating all the money, So they don't want any leak because they want all the money. So if you donate from Germany to this institution, it will go. Yeah, I mean, let's make a joke. I mean, my mother said he sent half of the money to Kızılay. And I told her that, yeah, Erdogan's wife need a new, hat. So maybe she can use it for this. Unfortunately, this is our understanding. I mean, whatever you give to them, it will go directly to the family or some Islamist organizations, some militia.
What is with the United Nations? I mean, the United Nations as an international body, is this a trustable body?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully international organizations will step in now. I mean, including WHO, United Nations, IMF in economy. So they will take care of the whole thing, most probably, and they will control. But for the moment, unfortunately, people are suffering, and people wants to send money or help, but they cannot want to feed Erdogan with their money, and they don't want Erdogan to use this money for his own interest. And that's why it's very difficult. Many people were asking here in Germany to me, how can we send the money? And they are trying to bypass, they are trying to bypass the official channels and reach the real people, and it's almost impossible.
There was a guy, I guess he was a singer, a popular singer,
exactly,
who collected a lot of money. What happened to him?
Yeah, he turned into a hero. He's a pop singer. He used to be a pop singer. All of a sudden, he turned into a really hero, and people trust him more than they trust Erdogan. And his organization is so big, has become so big, that people start paying for him. And all of a sudden, the government circles starts attacking him and saying that you should give this money to us, to the official channels. And most probably they will shut down his institution and so get all the money he collected so far.
Wow. And what he said about that? Was he
he's of course no, he's really scared, and he's trying to compromise with the government, saying that of course we are also working for the government and we don't want to destroy. Yeah, it's not so easy, because you are challenging a kind of dictator. So he has the ability to, use the police force, use everything he has got, and nobody can protect you if you are the target of the government.
Is there anything that the European Union or the Germans can do?
Now it's time to support the civil society, the opposition, democratic opposition in Turkey. This is really live now, and after the earthquake, they are more stronger. And I'm proud of the people really who are resisting in solidarity and suffering, but helping each other. And I'm very proud that many of the world countries sent help and rescue teams, including Germany. And people are really, all the diplomatic tension is gone all of a sudden with this earthquake. And we have a huge society, international society. And I guess Erdogan came to power thanks to the ruins of 99th earthquake. Because after this, people start questioning the state, why they are in suffering under these circumstances, etc. And Erdogan came and said, okay, this is over. We are here to save you. And people voted for him. And my first comment was, Erdogan came to power with an earthquake and will go out of power with another earthquake. And this will be his last chance.
Can, what is your personal feeling about that? You are far away, you are in exile, you were forced to live in exile. Your friends are there, your family, your people the people you work with. What is your turn?
It's really difficult to be in Turkey nowadays, of course, but it's really also very hard to watch your country is, in horrible situation and watching it from afar. And we've been spending sleepless nights in front of the TV and crying all day long. And it was really very tough. And you cannot do anything, unfortunately. just trying to give voice and explain people that we are here to help, but it's helpless. And the only hope is this will be a channel to get rid of this government. It's a very painful channel, very sad thing, but unfortunately maybe Turkey would need something like this kind of disaster to get rid of this horrible government. And now people, most of the people, even the AKP Erdoğan supporters, understood what kind of a guy they are supporting.